Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are installing a Stoptech BBK on the M3. As you guys just saw in the intro, it is a ST60 6-piston front caliper in yellow color and a ST40 in the rear with yellow caliper, 4-piston in the rear, and I believe it's a 350mm or 355mm rotor in the rear and a 380mm rotor in the front. I really wanted to fill out the wheels as much as possible, and the 6-piston 380 does just that. It's going to fill up the whole wheel well of the front wheels. Yeah, as you guys can see, the car's fully taken apart already. We are in a rush to get all these parts installed for Monterey Car Week, so we are going to start crunching down and going over and installing one side. I'll show you guys how to install one side of the car, and then I'll do the other side off camera, and then we'll take a look and do the bedding in process of these brakes, because that is one of the most important parts of this whole install, is the bedding in process. Because if you don't do it properly, you can basically crystallize the surface of your rotors, and they'd be pretty much like glass when you're trying to brake. So the bedding in process is very important. I think that's enough talking. I don't have much time to get everything installed, and let's get straight to it. Okay, let's also kind of go over the stuff that you get in this kit. So, start this off, we get the 380mm front rotors. Then you get 2 boxes as well for brake pads in this one. So there's brake pads for the front calipers, and then accessories, which means brake lines, stainless steel brake lines. Right there, we got stainless steel brake lines, and then over here we're gonna have the front mounting brackets as well. Now, if we take a look, on the inside of the car, we have to take off the caliper, the disc. We might have to take off that dust shield right there. But I saw online some people saying that the new rotors will clear the front dust shield, that the rear has to get cut. So once I take everything off and start test fitting the new rotors, I'll be able to tell you guys exactly what's what and what has to be done. So now we're starting to work on the caliper, and this is pretty much like any standard brake change that you're going to be doing. That's how it's starting out. So what we have to do is take off 2 bolts on the rear of the caliper to loosen this caliper and be able to take it off the rotor. Now when it comes to the rotor, we have to take off 2 hex bolts. So there's one right here and one right here, or you'll see it on the rotor. It might be in a different position because of rotation, but there's 2 of them kind of opposite of each other. So these are the 2 pieces I was talking about. These are the bolts that we have to take off from the caliper, and it'll allow us to take apart the caliper itself, and we can push the cylinder back in, and then this will pop right off. Another thing to mention, since I just took off the spring right here, so this part came off. When you're doing this brake job, you want to depress the brake pedal inside the car, so when you're doing this whole thing, you don't get air bubbles going up into the system, and then you have to do a full system bleed with the fluid and through the computer and stuff like that. So what you have to do now, since the brake pedal is depressed and you can't loosen the caliper, it's loose now but you can't get it off, you have to take off the brake line, and we have to change the brake lines anyway. So we just have to bleed the fluid out of the brake line so we can actually take the caliper off, and then we can continue. So what we're gonna do is, I have a little bucket right here, and I'm gonna have that underneath the car, and I'm gonna undo the brake line on the caliper side. Hopefully all the fluid will leak into the bucket, and then once that's done, we can start taking this off. I'll be able to loosen the pressure inside to get the caliper off. I finally got the disc to loosen off of the hub, and what I did is I put a screw in at one of the lug nut locations, and then I had to use some gentle persuasion with this hammer and hammer the back side right here a few times until the rotor fell off and now, or popped off, and now we can just unscrew this bolt and take the rotor off, and then we have the hub completely exposed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to test fit the new rotor and see if it clears this shield. If it doesn't, it looks like there are two bolts, one right here and one on this side, which hold this heat shield in. I'm hoping that that's all there is to it, and then I can just take it off and we don't have to do any cutting. If not, we're going to have to cut it somewhere around here and then install the new rotor. But I'm going to test fit the other one and then we'll see, and we'll go from there. This dust shield will fit with the brake kit, but you do have to modify it a little bit. So what I had to do was this piece right here. So this piece right here, you have to bend it back a little bit. So it used to stick out more this way, and I kind of just folded it and bent it back a little bit. You only need to bend it back a few millimeters to get the clearance you need, but that's it. And then on this side, this metal piece used to extend this way, so it used to kind of go this way, and you kind of want to just bend it back. As you can see, I just bent the piece back like that, and by doing so, we're getting enough clearance for the caliper to go right here and have enough clearance right there. And you just do the same thing downstairs. Just bend it back, the metal piece, just bend it back ever so slightly. You can actually do this by hand, so the sheet metal is so soft you can just bend this back by hand, and I used my fingers actually to bend this back right here. The bolts used for this bracket are the OEM bolts you take off from your car, so some of the stuff you will have to keep from your old brakes to mount the new ones, and that is this piece right here. Before we actually prep these brakes for install, or the discs, I just wanted to compare the OEM disc versus the Stoptech disc, and kind of just show you guys the differences. I went with slotted rotors because when I track the car, I don't want my discs cracking around the little holes. These are OEM CSL brake discs, so we do have larger discs compared to an OEM M3. The big difference is this is 345, that's 380, but also just looking at it, the thickness. So if we look at this and compare it to this, the thickness is much larger right there. And also, if you're, pro tip, if you're looking to buy a car, a sports car or something like that, and you see that the discs right here have a red shine to it, just know the car's been tracked and driven hard, because that happens from heat cycling and really stomping on the brakes, and that pretty much only happens on the track. So just a little pro tip for you guys to watch out if you're buying a new car, a sports car, and they say they've never tracked it, and you see that on the brakes. And now when we go to the caliper side, 6-piston front calipers, as you guys saw in the preview right here, and then we have a single piston caliper right here. And what the surprising part is, this is lighter than that. So like the new brake assembly is lighter than the old one. So I'm gonna weigh what the caliper versus this caliper is, and then the discs are. But you also have to note this disc is a lot lighter than, or this disc is lighter than a brand new one of these, because it's used and a lot of material has worn off. These brakes are pretty much dead, and these are brand new, so this one's going to have a lot more life on it than this one, which is getting thrown away. So there's also that to know, but we'll see what the differences are in mass as well. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to tell you guys at the end of the video what the weight difference is as well. So this next step is only important if you have non-zinc plated brakes. You have to clean them in a two-step process. So you need soapy water to clean off. There's like a lubricant on them so they don't rust. It's like an anti-rusting lubricant. So we need to wash that off the brakes, and then we have to clean it with the brake cleaner and use like a very clean paper towel or microfiber towel to dry off or clean it off, and then we can install it on the car. Once we do this, the surface of the steel can start rusting, like a surface rust, but that's completely normal and completely fine. So we're gonna clean off everything off the disc with the soapy water first, and then with the brake cleaner, and we'll install it on the car then. We're going to get brake cleaner. Spray it onto here. And then clean the surface thoroughly. Tell on camera, but it has this raw metal finish on the disc, and it is ready to get installed on the car. So let's jump to the front of the car and install the disc, and then we can install the caliper. Little trick, I'm going to put this bolt in just to secure it in place so it doesn't fall out on me again. This is just while I work on getting the other bolt on. Second one. Okay. So when I tighten this down, I wanted to make sure there's nothing interfering with the disc, and on the back side right here, a little piece is still touching. So we'll take the disc off, bend that back, and then reinstall this again. So we have the caliper that goes on. We torqued on the bracket to the car, and we have the disc on. Now we have to get the caliper on, and here we go. So the caliper's on, and you get hardware with it. So you get a washer and a nut. So with this, it says to tighten it down to 30 foot-pounds or 40 Newton meters. So we're gonna do that. As you just saw, I did not put in the brake pads. And the reason for that is the brake pads go in from the rear. With the BBK, and unlike the original, you don't have to put in the brake pads and then the caliper assembly. You can undo these bolts right here, put it in, and then at track days you can swap them out pretty quickly in between race pads and street pads. So now I'm going to just torque down the two nuts right here to 30 foot-pounds, and then we are done with this side, and we'll hop on to the rear to install the rear pads, the rear discs. So now we're in the rear of the car, and what we have to do is the same thing as the front. So it's pretty similar. We're going to take this off right now. We're going to unhook the brake line from the caliper since the brake is depressed. That way we can actually move the caliper and then pull it off. And then to remove this top bracket right here, we have to take off two more bolts on the back, which should be 16mm bolts. And once we remove that, we can take the caliper assembly off on the rear. So what I want to show on this, everything's pretty much the same as what we did in the front. You take off the caliper, you take off the disc with the two Allen head screws, and then you remove the disc. The only difference that we're gonna have to do with these is we're gonna have to cut this heat shield off around here. So around this circle or circumference, we're going to be cutting the heat shield off, that way so we can clear the thick new rotors, because the rear rotors are a lot thicker than these that aren't currently on the car. So that's the plan. So we're going to start doing that now, and then we will proceed to install the brake lines on all 4 corners. So I'll show that as well. Yeah, so that's a little overview. I'm going to start working on this brake assembly, and then we can continue with the next steps. Okay, so we got the rear brake disc off and the caliper, and now what we have to do is trim this dust shield off because it is completely in the way of the rear disc. So this whole portion is touching the disc, so we're gonna trim it right here across the edge, and then once trimmed we can install the disc, and it's pretty straightforward. And this is the e-brake mechanism as well. Okay, so we have finally finished cutting the dust shield off. As you can see, we use this groove right here as a guide and cut around the whole hub to create the perfect radius for the disc. This little groove right here also kind of provides a little bit of protection for the e-brake, so not as much dust or rocks can come in. Yeah, so now that everything's prepped for the new discs, I'm gonna go wash them as I did with the fronts and prep them for installation. But here's also what the disc or the dust shield looks like. The cutout right here was the groove, and we used the outside edge to cut. Okay, so we installed the brake lines, and what you have to do is just tighten it down with the 15mm wrench right there, and then we just have to connect it to the caliper. Now we're going to just install the brackets that come with the caliper, and then we can reassemble everything. It's pretty simple. It's the same thing as on the front, so I won't show it, but it's just bolting down the caliper bracket and then adding the disc and caliper, and then we're done with the install. So we'll just do that now, and then we'll show you the final product. Alright, so there's a special process. See how there's 2 nipples to bleed? There's one in the back and one in the front. So it's separated between these 2 portions of the caliper. And what we want to do is we're going to start in the rear passenger side, then the rear driver's side, then the passenger side, and then the driver's front side. And that's how we're going to work our way up to bleed out the air out of the system. So I took the cap off and I kind of wrapped it in some paper so I don't get a lot of this brake fluid anywhere on the car, because it can damage the paint. What you want to do is take this nozzle and wrap it right here, and then tighten it with this, because we're going to be pressurizing the system. Make sure it's tight. And now this is the bottle that we're going to be using to pressurize the system. So we're going to take this nozzle right here and plug it in right there. I pressurized the canister to 10 psi, as you can see. I hope you can see. So 10 psi. This is a one-man brake kit canister to allow you to bleed the brakes. Also hooked it up to the car. It was started leaking initially, but I think I didn't tighten it the proper way or enough. So now it's not leaking, and now we can go to the back and start bleeding the brakes. The bleeding process on the BBK is you start from the right passenger side, rear, and you bleed the outside, and then you bleed the inside. And let me see, it should be, it's an 11mm hex. So what you want to do, put it on top like this, secure it. Then we have the special tool we made for bleeding, and then loosen it until fluid comes out. There's going to be a lot of air in these, so it might take a while. But right there, see? We got fluid coming out. And you just want fluid, no bubbles coming at all anymore. And then I'm gonna go double check and make sure the pressure is still good. And there we go. Now it's all going in here without any bubbles, and now we just have to go to the next side. So now I'm gonna do the rear inboard, and then once I have that done, I can start on the driver's side, working on the driver's side. Same thing, out then in. Then the front passenger side, out and in, and then the driver's side, front, out and in, and then we're gonna be good. So once I have all that done, we'll go over and see how these brakes look installed on the car. Alright, so this is the view of the calipers. This is what they look in the front. It's very tight clearance on these wheels, but I talk about that in the wheel video. But they do look amazing. They really pop in person. They're very bright yellow, like almost like a speed yellow from Porsche type of color. Might be the same color actually. They look amazing in pictures. They look awesome. It matches the car perfectly. The gray, the silver gray with the yellow looks amazing. Here we go with the rears. So these are 355 rears, 4-piston, and they do fill out these brakes nice, the wheels nicely. In the rear, 19-inch BBS LMRs are filled out pretty much almost completely in the rear. The fronts, there's no space. There's like, it's so hard to get the wheel on without scratching anything. It's pretty tight. So these fronts are larger by 10 millimeters than the OEM CSL front brakes I had on this car, which were 345 discs in the front. Alright, that's it for the brake caliper install on the BBK from Stoptech. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. As you guys saw, the car looks amazing. Love the brakes, love the yellow. I definitely recommend the yellow color, especially on a gray car. And make sure to comment down below what other kinds of mods you guys would enjoy on the M3, because I do have some plans and some ideas. But your guys' input also helps sometimes, kind of help me choose which ideas I want to go with. And yeah, we're gonna be starting to work more on the 1 Series now, since this car is kind of done. It's like, I'd say 85% there of what I want to do to the car. So yeah, as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.